A millionaire woke up with no memory, but the nurse who saved him became his reason to live. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main characters. It started on a rainy night in Northern California, the kind of night when fog rolls down the Redwood Hills and the air smells like wet pine and gasoline. Highway 101 was slick, nearly empty, except for one silver Range Rover cutting through the darkness. Behind the wheel was Joe Willock, a man whose name once appeared on Forbes lists and financial magazines. But tonight, he was just a shadow in a storm, gripping the wheel tighter than reason allowed. Lightning flashed. In that half-second of blinding white, a figure appeared on the road, a woman, standing completely still. Joe slammed the brakes. Tires screamed. The car spun out of control, crashing through the guardrail and tumbling down the slope. The woman vanished into the fog like she had never been there. A mile away, the faint rumble reached Willow Creek Clinic, a small wooden building with peeling white paint and a flickering porch light. Inside, Claire Bennett, the clinic's nurse, was finishing paperwork when the power flickered. Her dog, Scout, barked once and went quiet, ears up. Then came the distant crash. Claire grabbed her raincoat and emergency bag, her heart already racing. She radioed the county sheriff but got no signal typical for this valley. The rain hit her face like needles as she ran toward the road, flashlight slicing through the fog. Down in the ravine, the Range Rover was crumpled against a fallen tree, its headlights cutting two pale tunnels into the storm. Claire climbed down, slipping in the mud, shouting, "Sir, can you hear me?" Through the shattered window she saw him, blood on his temple, motionless. His watch had stopped at 10:47 p.m. She pressed two fingers to his neck, a faint pulse. "Come on, do not you dare give up on me," she whispered. She pulled open the door, rain drenching both of them. The airbag had not deployed. It looked like he had turned the car intentionally at the last second, maybe to avoid hitting something. Using her flashlight, Claire saw the interior was pristine. No phone, no wallet, not even a key fob. Every serial number on the dashboard had been scratched off. That was strange. Too deliberate. She dragged him from the wreck, laid him flat on the wet grass, and began CPR. Her hands pressed rhythmically against his chest as rain pounded her shoulders. "Breathe. Come on, breathe." On the third round, he gasped sharply, eyes wide open, filled with confusion and terror. "Where am I?" "You are safe," Claire said quickly, leaning closer to hear him over the thunder. He blinked, disoriented, voice trembling. "Who are you?" "Someone who is not giving up on you," she said, her breath visible in the cold air. He tried to sit up but winced, grabbing his side. She steadied him. For a split second, lightning flashed again, illuminating his face, strikingly familiar, the kind of face she was sure she had seen before. Somewhere. But before she could think, he whispered, "There was a woman on the road." Claire frowned. "What woman?" "She was standing there. In the rain. I tried to—" He winced again and fell unconscious. Claire looked around. There was no one else, only the storm and the echo of waves crashing from the Pacific miles away. No footprints, no silhouette, just the hiss of rain swallowing his words. She shivered, staring into the darkness. Maybe the crash had scrambled his memory. Or maybe someone really had been there. By the time she got him back to the clinic, the power had gone out completely. The only light came from a kerosene lamp and the steady green blink of the heart monitor. Claire wiped the blood from his forehead and whispered, "You are safe now, mystery man. Whatever you were running from, it cannot reach you here." Outside, thunder rolled once more, echoing through the valley like the sky itself was warning her that she had just saved a man whose past might destroy them both. When Joe opened his eyes again, the world was quiet except for the faint buzz of fluorescent lights and the slow, steady rhythm of a heart monitor. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. His chest ached, his throat was dry, and every muscle felt heavy. A single thought cut through the fog: he was alive. But that was all he knew. He turned his head and saw a woman sitting beside him, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun, her scrubs wrinkled from a long night. She looked like she had not slept in days. When she realized he was awake, She exhaled a small breath of relief. "Good morning," she said softly, adjusting the IV line. "You are at Willow Creek Clinic. You have been unconscious for almost 12 hours. You are safe now." Where is that?" Joe's voice cracked. "North California, Mendocino County," she replied. "A storm knocked out the main road. You are lucky I found you when I did." He blinked as slowly. "Who are you?" "Claire Bennett," she said. "Nurse? And you?" He frowned, staring at the ceiling. His mind reached for something, anything, but came back empty. I do not know." Claire paused, watching his confusion. She had seen shock, panic, and pain before, but there was something different about this man. His eyes were too clear, his fear too quiet. She reached for a clipboard and wrote a note. "Unknown male, estimated age 35, temporary name, Joe Doe." He gave a small, humorless smile. "Joe Doe. Guess that makes me one of a kind. You have a mild concussion, a few broken ribs, and some nasty bruises," Claire said. "No head bleed, no spinal damage. Your body is healing. The memory loss might take a while. It happens." He nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the small wooden window. Outside, rain still tapped against the glass, a sign of life. A few hours later, Claire returned with a tray chicken broth, a bottle of water, and 2 small pills. Joe tried to sit up but winced in pain. Claire helped him adjust the pillow. Her hands were steady, gentle, but her eyes avoided his. "You can rest," she said quietly. "There is nowhere else to be right now." He watched her move around the room, checking equipment, scribbling notes. The clinic was old but spotless. Wooden floors creaked with every step. On the far wall hung a faded photo of volunteers rebuilding after a wildfire, the same kind that had scarred much of Northern California last year. Claire was in that picture, younger but still holding that same steady look. "Do you run this place alone?" Joe asked. "Mostly," she said, not looking up. "We used to have more staff, but funding cuts do not exactly favor small-town clinics." He studied her. There was a quiet sadness in her tone, a fatigue that went deeper than work. "You live here?" She nodded. "In the back room. Cheaper that way, and patients show up at any hour, so it helps." Joe wanted to ask more, but she was already checking his pulse again. Her fingers brushed his wrist, and for a brief moment, something flickered, a memory maybe, or a feeling. He could not tell which. As she noted his vitals, he saw a faint burn mark on her arm, old but visible. "What happened?" he asked. "Wildfire last summer," she said simply. "We lost half the town. I stayed behind to help." He stared at her, realizing that she was the kind of person who ran toward danger while everyone else ran away. That night, as the storm softened into a mist, Joe lay awake listening to the wind whistle through the cracks of the clinic walls. Every now and then he heard Claire's footsteps in the hallway. There was comfort in that sound, steady, certain, alive. He closed his eyes and saw flashes again, waves hitting rocks, the taste of coffee, a piano chord echoing in a large room. Then Claire's voice cut through it all, soft but firm, saying, "Breathe, you are safe here." He opened his eyes and whispered into the dark, "Safe, where?" Outside, the first morning light stretched across the wet pines. Inside, Claire checked his chart and whispered to herself, "He is healing fast, but something about this feels different." Quote, and for the first time in a long time, she felt that strange pull of curiosity, not just about who he was, but about why saving him felt so personal. By the 3rd day, Joe had settled into a rhythm at Willow Creek Clinic. He still could not remember his past, but his body was stronger. The bruises on his ribs were fading, and his hands no longer trembled when he tried to hold a cup. Every morning, the sound of the old coffee maker filled the quiet halls, and every morning, Claire's voice reminded him, "Breathe, you are safe here." Claire treated him the same way she treated every patient, steady, professional, kind, but guarded. Yet there was something about him that broke through her usual distance. He was polite, careful with words, and strangely observant for someone who claimed to have no memory. He asked questions about small things. Why the clinic used glass thermometers instead of digital ones. Why there were lavender plants on every windowsill. She explained, "Lavender calms people. It calms me too." Joe smiled faintly. "Then you must have been through a lot." She did not answer, only changed his bandage. The days began to fall into a quiet routine. Claire took his vitals twice a day, checked his sutures, and replaced the IV fluids. Joe, restless from staying indoors, started helping with small chores. He fixed a broken hinge on the supply closet, replaced a light bulb that had been flickering for weeks, and even organized the medicine shelves. "You do not have to do that," Claire said one afternoon, watching him carefully stack bottles. "I need to feel useful," he replied. "Sitting still makes me think too much." "And what do you think about?" He paused. "About what kind of man I was before all this, and whether I liked him." She looked at him for a long moment. "Maybe you do not have to remember to start over." Later that evening, Claire brought him a simple dinner soup and bread. She noticed the way he handled the spoon, graceful, almost practiced, not like someone used to working with his hands. That told her more than any medical chart could. He was not a farmer, not a mechanic. There was something refined about him. But when she asked, "Do you think you had family?" he only shook his head. "I feel like I was alone," he said quietly. Not sad about it, just used to it. After dinner, Joe wandered into the hallway where the clinic kept donations. On a dusty shelf, he found a small, cracked radio. He turned the dial until a faint tune came through a soft jazz melody, warbling through static. Something inside him stirred. His fingers tapped unconsciously to the rhythm, like muscle memory trying to remind him of a life he had forgotten. Claire watched from the doorway. "You look like you know that song." "Maybe I used to play it," he said. "On what instrument?" He hesitated. "Piano, I think. I can almost feel the keys." She smiled softly. "Then, when you get better, maybe you can play again." He looked up at her, eyes curious. "Would you listen?" Claire's expression flickered between surprise and something she could not name. "I might," she said, "if you are any good." A brief silence passed before Joe spoke again, his voice lower. "Claire, why do you do this? Working alone, so far from everything?" She looked at the rain sliding down the window pane. "Because sometimes saving people is the only way to save yourself." The words hung in the air, heavy but true. As she walked out, Joe glanced down at his wrist. The old watch had been cleaned and set aside on the bedside table. He picked it up and ran his thumb over the back. There was an engraving, faint but legible, "To JW for every tomorrow." He stared at it for a long time, the initials JW echoing in his mind like a name he had not heard in years. That night, he dreamed of light reflecting off tall glass buildings and of a woman's voice whispering his name. When he woke, the room was dark except for the glow of the monitor. Claire had left a note on the tray. "Breakfast at 7. Do not move too fast today." He smiled to himself, whispering into the quiet room. "Whoever I was before, I think I like this life better." And maybe, he thought, some memories were meant to be replaced, not recovered. Have you ever met someone who made you feel safe, even without words? By the end of the first week, Joe was strong enough to walk without assistance. The bruises on his ribs had turned yellow, his memory was still blank, but his sense of curiosity had returned in full. Claire noticed how his eyes followed every detail, the sunlight moving across the wood floor, the way the wind bent the trees outside, the quiet rhythm of life at Willow Creek Clinic. One morning, she found him sitting outside on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the hills. The air smelled of pine and rain-soaked soil. He was carving something small from a piece of driftwood, his hands moving carefully as if they had done this before. "What are you making?" she asked, stepping out with 2 cups of coffee. He smiled faintly. "A bird, I think. Maybe a sparrow. It feels familiar." Claire handed him a cup and sat beside him. "You must have been good with your hands," she said. "I do not know. Maybe I was. Or maybe I am just trying to remember what it feels like to create something." Quote, "The moment was quiet, almost tender. She could hear the steady hum of bees from the nearby lavender field. For a second, the whole world seemed to pause." Joe turned to her. "You said you stayed during the wildfire. Why?" Her gaze drifted to the mountains in the distance, where the trees still bore black scars. "Because someone had to," she said. "Most people ran when the fire crossed the ridge. I stayed because there were still people trapped in the valley. It was not courage, really. Yes, responsibility." He studied her face. "You make it sound simple, but it is not. You saved lives." "I lost one too," she said quietly. "My fiancé. He was a firefighter. The fire turned so fast that day there was nothing anyone could do." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Joe's expression softened. He did not try to comfort her. He simply listened, and that was enough. After a long pause, he said, "I think I know how that feels. To lose something you did not realize was everything until it was gone." Claire glanced at him. So you think you lost someone too? I do not know. Maybe. But every time I try to remember, all I see is a city skyline and a piano. Then it fades. She nodded slowly. Memories return when they are ready. For now, just focus on healing. That afternoon, Joe asked if he could help around the clinic. The next few days, he repaired a broken cabinet, trimmed the overgrown bushes, and fixed the loose roof shingles. Claire pretended to scold him for overworking, but secretly she enjoyed watching the place come back to life. At night, when the lights dimmed, they often shared dinner at the small wooden table near the window. It became a ritual. Claire cooked, Joe cleaned up. They talked about books, music, and childhood stories they could both barely remember. It was as if they were building new memories to replace the lost ones. One evening, after a long day, Joe played with the old radio again. He found a piano melody drifting through static, soft, haunting, familiar. Claire stopped what she was doing. He said quietly, "That song, I know it." "From where?" He shook his head. "I cannot place it, but when I hear it, it feels like coming home." Claire sat down across from him, her voice almost a whisper. "Maybe home is not a place you remember. Maybe it is a feeling you find again." Their eyes met, and for the first time since his accident, Joe felt something shift deep inside, a small warmth breaking through the fog of lost memories. Outside, the storm clouds began to part, revealing a slice of silver moonlight over the hills. Claire stood and said, "It is getting late. Try to sleep. Tomorrow we will see how your balance is doing." He smiled softly. "Tomorrow," he repeated, glancing at the watch on the table. That word means more here than it used to. As she turned off the lamp, the faint melody from the radio lingered in the air, and somewhere in that quiet, Joe realized that even without his past, he was beginning to find a reason to stay. The next morning, the sun rose warm over the valley, painting the sky in pale gold. For the first time since the accident, Joe felt strong enough to walk beyond the porch. Claire stood by the gate, watching him take careful steps along the gravel path. His balance was steady, his posture confident. "You are healing faster than I expected," she said. "Maybe I just have a good nurse," he replied with a smile. She shook her head. "Do not flatter me. It is probably the mountain air." He laughed quietly, the sound soft and unfamiliar in this quiet place. The hills echoed back, as if the land itself wanted to keep his laughter. Over the next few days, their routine became lighter, filled with small moments that made the clinic feel alive again. Joe helped deliver supplies from the nearby farm, chatted with the old mail carrier, and even played fetch with Scout when Claire was busy. For a man with no memory, he seemed oddly at peace. But peace never lasts long. One afternoon, a sleek black SUV rolled down the dirt road, its tires throwing dust into the air. Claire looked up from the garden, frowning. No one from the city ever came this far unless it was serious. The car stopped at the gate, and two men stepped out, dressed in sharp suits that looked out of place among the wildflowers. "Can I help you?" Claire called out. One of them glanced at her clipboard, then at Joe, who stood frozen near the porch. "We have been looking for that man," the taller one said, pointing directly at him. "Joseph Willock." Claire turned to Joe. His face had gone pale. The second man stepped forward. "Sir, thank God you are alive. The company has been searching for you for 3 months. There was a plane crash over the Pacific. Everyone thought you were gone." Joe's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "A plane crash?" "Yes, sir. You were scheduled to meet the board in Los Angeles that evening. Your private jet went off radar. The Coast Guard found nothing. Until now." Claire's breath caught. "You are a CEO?" The man nodded. "Joseph Willock, founder and chief executive of Willock Biotech." Quote. Joe stood completely still. The name hit him like a thunderclap. Images flashed behind his eyes: boardrooms, flashing cameras, glass towers reflecting the sun. His chest tightened. The life he could not remember was suddenly too vivid to ignore. "I need a minute," he said softly. The men nodded and waited by the car. Claire followed Joe inside. He sat on the bed, holding his head in his hands. "Joe," she said gently, "you do not have to go with them right now. You can stay until you are ready." He looked up, his eyes searching hers. "I remember things, Claire. Faces, offices, my name, but none of it feels like mine anymore." She hesitated, unsure how to comfort him. "Maybe it will feel right again once you go back." "Go back to what?" he asked. "A world that did not miss me? A life I cannot even feel connected to?" Claire had no answer. She turned away, hiding the ache in her chest. Outside, The men waited, their phones buzzing with news alerts. The headline would soon spread. Missing millionaire found alive in remote Northern California. Joe looked at the clinic one last time, the worn floorboards, the lavender by the window, the woman who had saved him when the rest of the world believed he was gone. I guess I was running from something after all, he said quietly. Maybe from myself. Claire's voice trembled. Will you come back? He met her eyes, a sad smile playing on his lips. If I remember what home feels like, I will find my way. As the SUV disappeared down the dirt road, the sound of the engine faded into the hum of the valley. Claire stood alone by the porch, the wind carrying the faint scent of lavender. For the first time, the clinic felt too quiet, too empty. And somewhere miles away, in a city full of glass and noise, Joe Willock began to remember everything except the one place that had made him feel whole. San Francisco glimmered beneath a layer of fog when Joe Willock returned to the city. The skyline looked the same, but it felt like someone else's life entirely. Every polished surface in his penthouse apartment reflected a man he no longer recognized. The staff greeted him nervously. The security team stood at attention, and his personal assistant kept saying how miraculous it was that he had survived. But all Joe could think about was the silence that came after the noise. He walked through the apartment like a stranger, touching the marble counters, the sleek furniture, the untouched piano in the corner. His hands hovered over the keys, uncertain. Then he pressed one note soft, hesitant, and the sound filled the room like a ghost returning home. He froze. That was the melody he had heard on the radio at Willow Creek Clinic. His assistant appeared at the door. Sir, the board meeting starts in 20 minutes. They are eager to see you back in control. God. Joe nodded absently. Tell them I will be there soon. When she left, he looked at his reflection in the grand window that overlooked the bay. The man staring back wore an expensive suit and a haunted expression. Somewhere between the mountain fog and these glass walls, he had lost the peace he found. At the meeting, cameras flashed. The executives applauded, but their smiles were rehearsed. Welcome back, Mr. Willock, said one of them. We knew you would survive. You always do. Quote. Their voices blurred as charts and profits filled the screens. Words like growth and innovation echoed across the room, but Joe's thoughts drifted to the sound of rain against wooden walls and the warmth of coffee handed to him by steady, kind hands. When it was his turn to speak, he stood, staring at the crowd of expectant faces. Thank you, he said slowly, for keeping things running. An executive leaned forward. We have several pending deals, sir. Once the press finishes your recovery story, we can relaunch your campaign. The world loves a comeback. Joe's mouth tightened. Does it? The room went silent. He could feel every eye on him, waiting for the confident billionaire they remembered. But that man was still somewhere in the hills of North California. That night, alone in his penthouse, Joe could not sleep. The rain had started again, tapping gently against the glass. He walked to the balcony and breathed in the cold air. But it did not smell like pine or earth. It smelled like exhaust and salt and distance. He poured himself a glass of water and sat at the piano. His fingers trembled slightly as they found the melody, the same one that had played through static in the clinic. But as he played, tears blurred his vision. He had no memory of writing the song, yet he knew every note. Somewhere, that melody belonged to the man he used to be. Somewhere, it belonged to her. He stopped and whispered into the empty room. Claire. The sound of her name felt like a confession. The next morning, news outlets reported the story of his return. Billionaire Joseph Willock found alive after 3-month disappearance. The headlines made him feel like a product being sold. Every call he received congratulated him, but no one asked if he was all right. At the end of the week, his assistant placed a thick folder on his desk. The charity division wants your approval to cut funding to rural medical clinics. They are not profitable. Joe stared at the words Willow Creek Clinic printed in small letters near the bottom of the page. He felt the blood drain from his face. Do not cut it, he said sharply. Increase it. Sir? You heard me. Double it. She hesitated. May I ask why? He looked out the window toward the fading horizon. Because some places are worth saving, even if they are not profitable. Quote. That night, he sat alone again, the city lights burning below like stars that had lost their warmth. He realized the truth of it. He had everything he was supposed to want. But the one thing he truly needed was hundreds of miles away, in a quiet wooden clinic that smelled like lavender and rain. Do you think true love can survive when the truth finally comes out? A week passed before Joe made his decision. He had attended every meeting, smiled at every camera, and signed every paper placed before him. But each signature felt hollow, like he was signing for someone else. The world had gotten its miracle story, the billionaire who survived, but Joe knew the truth. He had not survived at all. He had only returned to the wrong life. Late one night, he stood by the piano again, staring at the watch Claire had cleaned for him. The engraving glinted under the city lights. To J.W., for every tomorrow. He ran his thumb over the words, remembering the warmth of her voice when she said, "Tomorrow will be better." He could not ignore it any longer. At dawn, he called his pilot and requested a flight north. By noon, the private jet touched down near Mendocino County. He rented a truck from a local station and began the long drive up the winding road that led to Willow Creek. The further he drove from the city, the lighter he felt. When the scent of pine hit his lungs, he finally breathed fully for the first time in weeks. The clinic appeared just as he remembered, small, wooden, humble. The lavender outside was blooming again, turning the yard into a soft purple haze. For a moment he just stood there, afraid that maybe she was gone, that maybe she had moved on. But then, through the window, he saw her. Claire was bent over a chart, her hair tied back, a pencil tucked behind her ear. She looked tired but peaceful. The sight made his throat tighten. He stepped onto the porch. The wooden boards creaked beneath his shoes. Claire turned toward the sound, eyes widening when she saw him. "Joe?" Her voice was barely a whisper. He smiled faintly. "I'm sorry. I should have come back sooner." She walked toward him slowly, as if afraid he might disappear. "What are you doing here?" "I remembered everything," he said. "My name, my company, my mistakes. But the only thing that felt real was you." Quote. Claire looked away, her hands trembling slightly. "You have a whole world waiting for you, Joe. Why would you leave it behind?" "Because that world was noise," he said. "This," he gestured around them, "this is peace. You gave that to me." She shook her head. "I did not give you anything you did not already have. You just forgot it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the watch. "Do you remember this?" Her eyes softened. "Of course. Come on." He turned it over, revealing the new engraving below the old one. "For the woman who gave me today." Claire blinked back tears. "You did not have to do that." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind carried the scent of lavender between them. "I came to tell you something," Joe said finally. "I am building a new division at Willock Biotech. It will focus on rural medicine places like Willow Creek. I want to start with you." "Okay?" Claire stared at him, stunned. "You are serious?" "Completely," he said. "You once told me saving people was the only way to save yourself. You were right. I want to help you do it." A single tear slipped down her cheek. "Why are you really here, Joe?" He took a step closer, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Because I was looking for home, and I realized it was never a place. It was a person." Claire's breath caught. The truth in his words settled between them like sunlight breaking through the clouds. Behind them, Scout barked once, breaking the silence. Claire let out a small laugh, half joy, half disbelief. Joe smiled. "I take it he remembers me." She nodded, eyes glistening. He never forgot. Joe looked around, his voice soft. "Neither did I. I just had to remember who I wanted to be." And in that quiet moment, surrounded by lavender and light, Claire knew that the man who had once been lost had finally found his way home. The news spread quietly through the valley before anyone made an announcement. A fleet of trucks arrived one morning carrying lumber, medical equipment, and new solar panels. Locals gathered by the fence, whispering as workers unloaded supplies. No one knew exactly what was happening until a large wooden sign went up near the gate of Willow Creek Clinic. It read, "Willock Community Health Center, for every tomorrow." Claire stood beside the sign, speechless. Joe was there too, in rolled-up sleeves and work gloves, talking to the crew, helping move crates, as if he were one of them. When he caught her watching, he smiled, that same quiet smile she had not stopped thinking about since the day he left. "Do you like it?" he asked, brushing sawdust from his hands. "It is unbelievable," she said softly. "You really did this?" He nodded. "You saved me when no one else could. I thought the least I could do was make sure this place can keep saving others." Over the next few weeks, the transformation began. The clinic expanded from 2 small rooms into a full medical center with new exam tables, fresh paint, and modern equipment. A new wing was built with a pharmacy, an X-ray machine, and a small laboratory. Local doctors volunteered to help part-time. Children came by every day to watch the progress, waving at Joe as if he were some kind of folk hero. Claire tried to protest at first. "You do not have to stay here every day," she told him. He grinned. "If I do not stay, who is going to carry all the heavy boxes?" Sometimes he would fix lunch for the crew or sit on the steps with the townspeople, listening to their stories. Claire could see at the hard edges of his old life slowly fading. He laughed more, worked harder, and seemed lighter than before. The millionaire who once lived behind glass walls was now covered in dust, sweat, and something like peace. When the new clinic was finally complete, the whole town gathered for the opening ceremony. A banner stretched across the porch, fluttering in the summer breeze. Local musicians played softly, and a few news reporters had driven in from San Francisco, curious about the man who had turned his fortune into something tangible. Joe stepped up to the small podium that had been set up on the porch. His voice carried across the crowd. 3 months ago, I woke up in this clinic with no memory, no name, and no reason to live. A woman I did not know chose to save me anyway. She did not ask who I was or what I could offer. She just helped. The crowd was silent. Joe looked toward Claire, who stood off to the side, her eyes glistening. "People like her remind us what humanity really means," he continued. "I spent my life building a company that made medicine for profit. But here, I learned that healing is not a business. It is a choice, a promise to show up, even when it is hard." He paused and turned toward the clinic sign behind him. "That is why this new center will offer free care to anyone who walks through those doors, because everyone deserves a tomorrow." The applause came slowly, then grew louder, echoing through the valley. Claire covered her mouth, trying to hide her tears, but Joe saw them anyway. When the ceremony ended, the crowd dispersed, and the two of them stood on the porch together. The sun had started to dip behind the trees, bathing everything in golden light. Claire looked up at him. "You did not have to make that speech." "I needed to," he said, "because it was not about me." She smiled softly. "It was a little bit." He laughed. "Maybe a little." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the wind moving through the lavender. Then Joe reached for her hand. "Claire," he said, his voice steady and full of meaning, "thank you for reminding me what life is for." She squeezed his hand back. "You reminded me too." As the sky turned orange and purple, the sign above them caught the last rays of light for every tomorrow, and for the first time, both of them believed it. Autumn came quietly to North California. The air grew cooler, and the hills around Willow Creek turned a deeper shade of gold. The lavender fields began to thin, leaving behind their soft scent in the wind. The new Willock Community Health Center stood bright and steady against the fading season, its wooden walls gleaming with the promise of new beginnings. Inside, Claire moved through the clinic's halls with her usual calm precision, checking on patients, organizing supplies, and offering gentle smiles. It no longer felt like a lonely place. Children's laughter echoed from the waiting room, the sound of life replacing the silence that once haunted every corner. Joe was there most mornings, though not always in a suit. Sometimes he wore old jeans and a flannel shirt, working alongside the volunteers. He had learned to take vital signs, deliver supplies, and even help fix broken equipment. The millionaire who once owned skyscrapers now measured his days in lives touched, not profits gained. That afternoon, after the last patient left, Claire stepped outside and found Joe sitting on the porch steps, looking out toward the valley. The sun was low, painting everything in copper light. Scout rested at his feet, tail thumping lazily against the wood. "Long day?" she asked. "Good day," he replied. "I think I finally understand what that word really means." Claire smiled and sat beside him. The silence between them was easy, comfortable, like two melodies that had finally learned to play in harmony. He turned to her. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had not come out that night?" She nodded slowly. "Sometimes, but I think it was meant to be. Maybe you needed saving, and maybe I needed to save someone." Joe's gaze lingered on her face. "I used to believe that fate was just a word people used to make sense of accidents. But meeting you made me believe in something else. Not fate, exactly just the right people showing up at the right time." She looked away, the corners of her lips softening. "That sounds a lot like fate to me." They both laughed quietly, the kind of laughter that comes from peace, not from jokes. After a moment, Joe stood and held out his hand. "Come with me. I want to show you something. He led her down the path toward the small garden behind the clinic. There, beneath a willow tree, stood a new bench made of smooth oak. On it was a small plaque engraved with simple words, "For the ones who heal without asking why." Claire's eyes shimmered. "You did this?" He nodded. "I wanted a place where people could sit and remember what this place is for. Not me, not the company, just the reason." She touched the plaque gently. "It is beautiful." Joe looked at her for a long time, then said quietly, "There is one more thing." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the watch, the same one she had found the night he crashed. The gold glimmered in the fading light. He placed it in her hand. "Keep it," he said. "It started ticking again after the accident, and I think I know why. It was waiting for something real." Claire looked up at him. "Joe," he smiled, the kind of smile that held both gratitude and love. "I am not asking for anything. I just want you to know that every tomorrow I have now belongs here with you, with this place, with everything you taught me." For a long time they stood there under the willow tree, the world around them turning quiet except for the rustle of leaves. The sunset cast a soft glow across the field, touching their faces with light. Claire finally whispered, "If one day you forget all this again, what should I do?" Joe met her gaze, eyes steady and full of warmth. "Then remind me," he said. "Remind me that love is not something you remember, it is something you choose." The wind carried his words through the valley as the last light of day faded. The sign by the clinic glowed softly in the twilight. For every tomorrow. Somewhere, a new patient would arrive tomorrow, and the story would begin again. If you were Claire, would you have forgiven him and stayed? Or would you have walked away?